Greetings, Little Warriors. You're watching Little Wars TV. I'm Steve, and this is part 3 in my series on getting into 3D printing for historical wargamers. In part 2 of this series, you may recall I talked about things you might want to consider when deciding what 3D printer might be right for you. Now after that, maybe some of you went out and actually bought a 3D printer and have got it all set up and you're ready to go. If that's the case, then one of your questions might be, well, where can I find some good historical miniatures related 3D printable files? Well, that's what this part is about today. As I discussed a bit in my last episode, finding sci-fi and fantasy stuff out there to print up is easy. Historical miniatures wargaming related material, though, can be a little bit more of a challenge. Now, the sites that I talk about today are by no means the only places out there that have historical 3D printable files. So if I don't mention one of your favorite places to find 3D printable files, be sure to post them in the comments below because I'm interested in finding new places and I'm sure all the other viewers are as well. One last note before we get started. I don't know any of the designers I'm going to spotlight today personally, and none of these things that I'm going to show you have been specifically provided to me for free. If they were free, it's because they're free for everyone, and if they're a file that you have to pay for, I've paid for it. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Now, the first places that I'm going to take you to are what I call aggregation sites. They're sites that aren't limited to one particular designer or vendor, and the 500-pound gorilla in the area of aggregation sites is without a doubt Thingiverse. Thingiverse really should be your first stop anytime you're looking for a particular type of file. Though sometimes it can be hard to navigate and find exactly what you're looking for, that's because there is so much stuff here. And most of it is for free. There are some things that can help you with the navigation, like finding particular groups, like World at War, if you're interested in World War II files. Thingiverse is also great for finding specific designers that you're interested in. Two of my favorite that I found via Thingiverse are M. Bergman and Terrain for Print. M. Bergman is the one who designed all of the tanks that you've been seeing throughout this series. He's got versions in 1/100th scale and 1/200th scale. They're fantastic. He's got hundreds of them, and every single one of them is absolutely free. Terrain for Print is pretty much what the name implies. A lot of terrain pieces. You've seen me display the small Viking house that I printed up in 15mm. That's a terrain for print work. He does a lot of fantasy and a lot of sci-fi, but he also does some things that can be great for historicals as well. Now, similar to Thingiverse, but with a smaller selection and more often only with files that you have to pay for, are sites like My Mini Factory and CG Trader. Now, My Mini Factory tends to be more fantasy and sci-fi stuff than historical. There's not a lot of historical. And CG Trader, you have to be careful and make sure that you're looking at STL files, since they actually also have a lot of pure graphics files for like video game or video designers. But you can still find some good stuff here. Now, one designer I found on CG Trader is G. Hukek, and he specializes, at least that I've found, in World War II naval vessels. The models are scaled for 1/1800th scale, but of course you can resize those when you slice them. And the detail's actually pretty good. It's maybe not going to be as great as some of the higher end metal models, but some of the mid to low range metal and plastics that are out there, G. Hukek stuff is every bit as good. Now, looking at the screen, you might think that's pretty pricey, and let's face it, that's a lot of money to pay for digital files, but when you stop and consider, if you wanted to build up everything that he offers in metal miniatures, it would cost a lot more than that. Next up is a site that's probably familiar to almost all of you out there if you're wargamers, and that's Wargame Vault. They obviously have plenty of rules, paper terrain, and stuff like that, but did you know they also sell STL files? Well, they do. You head over to the site here and you pick Format, go down to STL, and what that's going to pull up is a whole bunch of different contributors, designers, community contributors who have uploaded files for sale and sometimes for free that cover a wide variety of different genres and eras, including historicals. Next up is another website you've probably all heard of, and that's Shapeways. Now you're thinking, isn't Shapeways a place where you order an item and they 3D print it for you? Well, most of the time that's right, but there are some designers out there who will sell their STL files for a cheaper price via Shapeways. Sometimes they even give them away for free. Now, it's very, very hard to find historical designers that are giving their stuff away or even selling the STL files, but it's still worth checking out. Lastly, I'll mention one of my favorite places, though it's a little bit of like playing the lottery when it comes to historical miniatures, and that's Kickstarter. There's almost always a Kickstarter ongoing, or 10, that have something to do with 3D printing. It's a little bit less frequent for them to have historical miniatures wargaming related Kickstarters, but they do happen. And actually some of the vendors that I'm going to get to describing to you shortly, including my favorite one of all time, I found through Kickstarter. So it's a great place to visit on the off chance that you might find an ongoing Kickstarter you're interested in, or just to find designers with stuff that you're interested in. And often if you do jump in on a Kickstarter, the benefits are you're going to get the files at a cheaper price, and for the most part they're going to be delivered immediately after the Kickstarter is over and payment has been processed. This isn't like some board game Kickstarters where you're going to have to wait a year for something to end up in your possession. That about does it for the aggregation site, so now I'm going to turn to the actual online vendors. Now all of these are online storefronts where they sell their STL files. But the ones I'm going to mention to you today, I bought from all of them and I've printed up their files. So I'll be able to show those to you, and if I'm talking about them today, I've had a good experience with them. First up is a vendor that has, if not the best, some of the best files available out there for 3D printing. Printable Scenery. As you can see from their front page here, they do have a lot of fantasy stuff and some sci-fi as well. But they do have a fair selection of historical related files available to you in a wide variety of time periods. My favorites, however, are the 28mm sailing ships that are on offer. The detail on these models is stunning. They're absolutely beautiful and worth every bit of the maybe slightly elevated price they have to pay for the files above other vendors. My current 3D printing project right now is actually their Mark II frigate model that you can see here. Next up is Z1 Designs out of the UK. Z1 has some great stuff in their Precinct 187 range for mid to late 20th century, particularly at 28mm, though you can always resize that in your slicer as we've talked about. Their models have excellent detail, like you can see here in this little Mel's Diner that I printed up and painted, and are also very reasonably priced. So keep an eye out for Z1, and they do often run some Kickstarters as well. Now, one of the easiest things to find for historical miniature gaming and 3D printing are buildings. What's a little bit harder to find sometimes is stuff to fill those buildings with, and that's where Halen Terrain comes in. Again, they focus primarily on 20th century and moderns, but from their fantasy ranges you can find a lot of things that would be appropriate for medieval or other periods in history. But what Halen really specializes in, at least as far as I'm concerned, is accessories, things to fill your buildings with. While each individual set can sometimes be a little bit pricey if you only want to print that set up once, if you need hundreds of something, it becomes very economical very quickly. And actually here, if you look at the Z1 Diner that I just showed you, I've filled it with a diner set full of seats, tables, and even a deep fat fryer from Halen Terrain. Next up is a website called 3D Alien Worlds. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound very historical, and the name certainly isn't. But if you look over here, they've got a category for samurai. And if you've watched any of Little Wars TV, you know that feudal Japan is a period that's particularly appealing to me. Well, in 28mm, 3D Alien Worlds is starting to offer a whole lot of stuff, and they've got new sets coming out every month or so. And the stuff is beautiful. I mean, here you can see a little wall and a wooden bridge in the Japanese style that I've printed up. The next thing I plan on getting is this ingenious 3D printed rock garden. I'm really looking forward to that. So if you're at all interested in gaming the samurai period, you really should check out 3D Alien Worlds on a regular basis. Alright, the next online vendor is my absolute favorite, and the one that I've printed up more stuff from than anybody else that we've talked about today. This is the place to go if you need a Norman townhouse or train station or church or, I don't know, a 3-foot-long U-boat model. I got all of these models from, and I'm probably going to mangle the pronunciation here, Najowitz Modelbau. I found him through Kickstarters. He does Kickstarters on a very regular basis, but also operates this storefront, and it is the Historical Miniatures Wargamer Motherlode. As you can see, he has tons of different eras available, everything from Old West to feudal Japan and China to ancient Rome to World War II to modern Middle East, in some sets that have some really great models in them. The files are generally sized for 20 millimeter, but you can size them up or size them down, and he's recently begun releasing a 6 millimeter scaled models like this Normandy set. A lot of the buildings you've seen me spotlight in this series have come from Gens, and I gotta say, the stuff looks great when it's printed up. Now, if you look through the cost of the sets here, they're each about $65, except for the 6 millimeter set. And that may seem steep, but actually you get quite a few models in every set, and they're, as I've said, they're very high quality. But even so, if you wait until the next Kickstarter that they run, and it seems like Gens has a Kickstarter up every couple of months, the Kickstarter sets tend to be cheaper, usually around €40, and very often he allows you as add-ons to add past Kickstarter sets, which are what are on his website, for €40 each. So you might be able to get 2 for €80 instead of 1 for 65. So if you're patient and you have the time, that's something to look out for. I think that's probably enough for today, but I hope that I've shown you some of the great sources out there for historical gamers in the 3D printing world. Now again, if you've got other sources or designers that I didn't show today, but you think people should know about, be sure to post them down in the comments below. Also, be sure to check out the Little Wars TV Facebook page and my personal page, Little Wars TV Steve, on Facebook if you want to see more photos and progress reports on some of my 3D printing projects. Lastly, if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button down there. That way you'll get all of Little Wars TV's fantastic content, including the next episode in this series, where I'm going to get technical again, and we're going to talk a little bit about some basic settings and terminology that, if you're just getting started in 3D printing, are important to know. See you then. Alright, so after the first few parts of the series, Greg tells me I need to do a better job of like smiling and emoting or something for better thumbnails, so let's give that a try. Hopefully you can get something from it.